Story 1. I climbed a mountain outside of town with friends. I stood on a large rock, which shifted and flipped over, landing on me and crushing me. Story 2. He accidentally shot himself while cleaning his hunting rifle. Initially, it was thought to be a suicide, but after searching his phone, it was discovered that he was looking up how to clean the rifle. Story 3. Nobody died in school. 1 year later, 8 dead. 4 in a car accident, 1 murdered, 1 by suicide, 1 from cancer, and the other I don't know. But it is a rather unusual statistic. Story 4. Accidentally shot in the back by his lifelong best friend while hunting. 1 was helping the other through a barbed wire fence and forgot to engage the safety. They were both my friends. The other friend never recovered emotionally. Story 5. She suffocated due to an unnatural position while her family was out of town. There were rumors of substance use, but her parents adamantly denied this and eventually posted her autopsy results on social media to stop the lies. Teenagers can be cruel. The poor girl fell asleep on her couch and suffocated in a tragic accident. Story 6. She took her own life. She was only in 7th grade. It was my senior year. She was a very sweet girl who slowly cleaned out her locker every day so her mom wouldn't have to. Story 7. A brain amoeba incident occurred when a person went swimming in a popular lake in Central Florida. The water was reportedly too warm. When he swam, water entered his nose, allowing the amoeba to enter his brain. Tragically, he passed away within a week. This happened during his 6th grade. Rest in peace, JB. Story 8. 1 person died during heart surgery, and another died in a car accident caused by a truck. After high school, a girl became involved with a man 30 years older than her, and he shot her before taking his own life when his wife found out. Story 9. 9th grade. A girl got pregnant during our summer break leading up to freshman year. The boyfriend was reportedly unstable and became increasingly erratic as the reality of being a teenage father approached. Early into freshman year, he held her hostage, took her to an old factory or warehouse, and committed double murder-suicide. It was a very sad case. About a year later, another girl stepped in front of an oncoming train as her form of suicide. It was a very tough year at my school. Thankfully, there were no further incidents, but we did have 3 math teachers involved in various cases of inappropriate behavior with students. Story 10. It was a good friend, a kind and intelligent person. During his summer job, he collapsed at the cash register with no warning. By the time they got him to the hospital, he was pronounced dead due to a brain aneurysm. It is an incredibly tragic incident. It really made me reflect on how short life truly is. Story 11. I have taught high school science for 30 years, and sadly, it is part of the job. Suicide and car accidents claim the lives of many young people. Story 12. He and his brother were riding jet skis when his brother jumped a wave and landed on him, cutting his head in half. He was dead before the jet ski stopped moving. The day after the funeral, his brother disappeared. This happened 25 years ago, and I now live 2,000 miles away from where it occurred. When I say the older brother disappeared, I mean he was not around the next morning. I don't know where he went or what happened. He was considered a missing person the last time I checked. I can't find him on Google or Facebook, so I assume he is still missing. Without revealing too much personal information, it happened in one of the southern states, by a lake. I found out about his brother's disappearance because my parents were friendly with the local police department, so they received all the relevant gossip. Story 13. They were on their way to see their mother at the hospital, who had just given birth to twin girls, when they were hit by a drunk driver who was on his 3rd driving under the influence offense. The car caught fire and they were trapped in the back seat. The girls did not survive. It was heartbreaking. Their mother gave birth to 2 baby girls and lost her older 2 girls in one day. The 3rd incident occurred during our freshman year. Our friend Melissa was shot in the head by another friend. Brandy, who found her father's shotgun, did not realize it was loaded, put it to Melissa's head, and pulled the trigger. Story 14. He and another guy we went to school with burglarized a house and got into a fight over whose belongings were whose. The other guy shot and killed him, then took him to his grandmother's house where he lived and hid him under a pile of laundry. The grandmother obviously found the body and reported it to the police. Story 15. He slipped while hiking on an outdoor education trip and was impaled by the cut stump of a young tree. He bled out before they could get him evacuated. Our school planted a tree on campus to honor him. Story 16. Donnie was a sickly child with a congenital heart condition. He was very frail in appearance and soft-spoken. He was friendly with everyone and liked by most. He collapsed suddenly at school due to a heart attack. One of the coaches performed CPR until paramedics arrived, but he did not survive. Story 17. He climbed a power pole and touched a high-voltage wire. He had so much makeup on in his coffin that he was barely recognizable. To clarify, this happened long ago. As I remember, he was a big fan of the old animated series Spider-Man. At that time, there was talk that he wanted to be like the villain Electro and saw this as his way to achieve it, but nobody really knows. Story 18. Suicide. He was being bullied. The sad part is that no one cared. His death was completely overshadowed by a popular girl who ended up driving headfirst into a tree. The marching band and sports teams wore ribbons for her. What did he receive? His father came to talk about suicide and bullying prevention, but it was laughed at. Story 19. He took a corner too fast, and his car plunged into a deep pond. Nobody witnessed the accident, and the car was not found until 11 years later when someone saw a car flying through the air and landing in the same pond. The divers discovered my classmate's car, the one that was seen entering the pond, along with another vehicle that had gone missing in the 1950s. In total, there were 5 deaths. Story 20. She ended up taking her own life due to constant sexual harassment at school, despite her friends reporting it to the dean and principal. It was really unfortunate because she was incredibly funny and sweet. Story 21. She was killed while floating in the lake by a drunk jet ski driver. We were given the next day off from school to mourn. A less popular girl was killed by a drunk boater the following week, but no day off was granted. Story 22. Bro was diagnosed with leukemia during our vacation. He died a few weeks after we returned to school. He was 1 year younger than me. I never talked to him, but I knew who he was. It was a strange day. Everyone was arriving at school and suddenly his classmates started to cry. The news spread. We only had half of our classes and were sent home. Story 23. He was paintballing with friends when the compressor exploded, hitting him in the head and putting him into a vegetative state for a week before he died. Story 24. He had a punching bag hanging from a tree in his backyard. He climbed the tree to take it down and adjust it while his little sister was nearby. The story I heard is that he was holding the loose chain up to his neck and making choking sounds to try to get a reaction from his sister. She rolled her eyes and went inside, but a short while later she noticed a strange silence. She went back outside and found him hanging from the tree. Apparently, while he was pretending to hang himself, he slipped and accidentally hanged himself. Story 25. Cancer. A car accident that killed her entire family, and suicide were just some of the tragedies faced by kids in my class. The 1980s weren't always that enjoyable. Story 26. A brain aneurysm occurred. He bent down in the hallway to tie his shoe and collapsed instantly. He was 15 years old. Rest in peace. Story 27. There was a head-on collision on a 2-lane road leading to the school. Everyone traveling to school had to drive past the scene. It was a difficult situation. Story 28. Not my school, but the other school in our town. A 15-year-old student had been bullied relentlessly for what was reported as being antagonized for 2 days straight and refused to stop when asked. The bully was also a 15-year-old sophomore who reportedly struck him in the groin and pelted him with various objects like erasers and paper wads. The victim asked the bully to stop, but he didn't. Finally, one day the victim snapped, waited outside a class they had just finished, and punched the bully in the head twice. The bully reportedly didn't see it coming, fell back, hit his head on a wall, and died the next day. The police refused to charge the victim with anything other than simple assault, a misdemeanor, and stated that any other charges would have to come from the district attorney. He was found guilty of aggravated assault, a misdemeanor, sentenced to time served, and walked free, with the felony conviction expunged. Whether the situation was justified is another story. Story 29. My first year at a boarding school, I shared a bunk bed with a friend. I slept on the top bunk while he slept on the bottom. I used to hear him cry every night, although I couldn't tell the reason why, as we were kids back then. He left school for 2 years to undergo surgery and receive medication, eventually returning. He had bone cancer, which was very painful. We were in the same classroom when Easter came along. He went back home to his parents, and the day after he left, our school announced that he had sadly passed away at such a young age, 17 or 18. His cries still haunt me to this day, not in a bad way but rather in a sad way. Story 30. He was the popular figure in high school and was accustomed to speaking disrespectfully to anyone because everyone would back down. Then he confronted the wrong person at a party and was shot, dying at 18. I feel bad for receiving support for sharing the story about how a classmate died. This was a person, not just a comment. Story 31. They had graduated by the time this happened, but a guy a few grades ahead of me went missing in the woods of Minnesota. He was out fishing and his truck was found, but they never found any sign of him. He was very experienced in nature and often went fishing alone. It has been at least 15 years since he went missing. Story 32. Drowned and got trapped under a tree branch and couldn't get out. It's crazy. A few days before, we were playing Grand Theft Auto and talking about how we would play next weekend, to now watching them lay him to rest. Rest in peace, forever 15. Story 33. Heroine was super popular, well-liked, a bit eccentric, and she was my best friend. I still miss her after all this time. Story 34. He was 17 years old. He drowned while saving his nephew. If I recall correctly, he had some sort of seizure while underwater. Story 35. Death plagued my class, the class of 2000. We had a classmate in middle school who stole a car and was assumed to have committed suicide by crashing into an oncoming vehicle on purpose to avoid being caught, killing himself and the occupants of the other vehicle. A very popular, kind, and sweet young woman died by self-inflicted gunshot during her sophomore year. There was no note, no evidence of bullying, and no answers as to why she seemingly took her life without warning. Another student died from a mixture of alcohol and pills during a party in junior year. A teammate of mine helped his dad build an ultralight aircraft, and both died in a plane crash during a test flight between junior and senior years. A classmate, heading to 0 hour, fell asleep at the wheel in a small car and collided head-on with a full-size pickup truck, both traveling at 60 miles per hour. I was right behind him, the second to reach his car, but the only one to stay with him while he passed. Lastly, one young woman disappeared late in senior year and has still never been found, after 25 years. We don't know if she was abducted, ran away, or if there was foul play, as she came from a troubled family. Story 36. Freshman year. A sophomore was crushed by a truck while working underneath it, when someone did not realize he was there and started to drive. Sophomore year. A senior died in a car accident on his way to school after hitting a patch of ice. Junior year. A freshman took his own life to avoid getting in trouble with his parents after they discovered he had a party while they were away. No one died during senior year, but 3 recent alumni passed away the following year. Story 37. Texting and driving on an icy morning. The poor individual was on life support for months but unfortunately did not recover. It frustrates me how many people use their phones while driving these days. This behavior can be fatal. Story 38. A girl 3 years older than I was brutally assaulted and nearly killed by her neighbor. She survived, but it affected her mentally so profoundly that a few years later she jumped out of a window. She survived that as well but was left disabled. She spent years doing interviews and slowly rebuilding her will to live. People generously donated money so she could get a wheelchair-accessible apartment and access specialized physical therapy that might help her walk again. She seemed to be in a much better place. She even had a boyfriend and was talking about the possibility of having children one day. Then she developed an infection after one of her many spinal surgeries and died of sepsis a few days later. Story 39. He and a friend were playing with a gun at the party when it accidentally discharged and killed him. Story 40. A boy was showing off his dad's gun to a group of friends, insisting there were no bullets inside. A girl kept saying it wasn't funny and it was dangerous to play with any gun, loaded or unloaded. The boy pointed the gun at the girl to show her it wasn't loaded and pulled the trigger. I didn't know her personally, but she was in my choir class and was really nice. The boy attended a neighboring school, so I didn't know him. I heard that he and his family ended up moving to a new city. It was awful all around. In my memory, I thought no charges had been pressed, but after reading some comments, I started to think charges probably should have been pressed. I found an article about the incident, and it looks like charges were indeed pressed against the 13-year-old boy who was involved in the accidental shooting that killed a girl in Provo. After reading the article, I realized it was actually his grandfather's gun, not his dad's. Story 41. Drunk and racing, he ended up killing all four of them in front of one of their homes. Rachel was his sister. Our town was very small, and this affected everyone for a long time. And yes, he survived. Story 42. One kid was involved in a hunting accident. He tripped and accidentally discharged a shotgun. In another incident, a car accident occurred when a driver lost control while coming over a hill, resulting in 2 fatalities after the car struck a steel bridge. Additionally, there was a go-kart accident where an individual hit a parked car and suffered a broken neck. Finally, during a game of chicken on mini bikes at night, one person died and another sustained severe injuries. The injured rider was the brother of the steel bridge accident victim. Story 43. I attempted to sell marijuana to a stranger, but I was robbed and shot. This experience makes you realize how many people you know at your age lose their lives so carelessly. Story 44. He died in his sleep. To this day, no one knows the medical cause. He appeared healthy and then simply did not wake up one day. Story 45. He never made it to high school. It was in 5th grade that it happened. His father, a police officer, shot him in the back of the head with a shotgun at near point-blank range. They went hunting after their mother left for the day. She had told them no because Junior hadn't done his homework. The geese came in, and he jumped up to show his father where they were, just as his father leveled the gun. That was the end of the family. She took the girl and left, while he turned to alcohol and eventually lost his job. I'm not sure what happened to them after that. They were a lovely family before. His father loved that boy with all his heart. Junior and I played hockey together. So sad it could inspire a country song. Story 46. She got in a car on a cold winter day to deliver blankets to a neighbor whose power went out. Her car hit a patch of black ice and went down an embankment. She was a beautiful soul and an incredible person. Many people loved her and miss her every day. Story 47. In a small town with around 5,000 residents, right before graduation, a classmate of ours overdosed on pills and then shot herself in the head while sitting on the train tracks, where her car was hit by a train. She did not die. None of us ever saw her again, but years later, I heard that she fully recovered. When it's not your time, it's not your time. Story 48. He and his brother were playing with their dad's service pistol. He accidentally shot himself in the stomach and died at the hospital. He lived for 15 years and has been gone for 16. Story 49. My brother was the one who died of cancer during his senior year. The yearbook dedicated a page to him, and there were a few other tributes the following year while I was a freshman at the same school. I hated it because my brother would have disapproved. He was a total contrarian, metalhead rebel, but it was what my mom decided was best, and I suppose it ultimately helped her through. Story 50. I flipped a car on the way home from a Halloween party. No one was drinking, but he wasn't wearing a seatbelt and was ejected. I didn't know him well. He was the starting center on the football team, so they honored him by lining up around the ball on the first play, with him missing in the middle. They took a penalty on the first down, which the opposing team declined. It was a touching gesture in a uniquely Southern football town kind of way. Story 51. Fell off a graduation booze cruise and drowned. Field trip to a movie theater, climbed a rock wall, fell and died. Driving a moped and got hit by a truck. Cancer. Overdose. hit by multiple cars during lunch break. The Goths actually ran a memorial group in high school since we had so many people die over the years. Story 52. Seniors used to camp out on the football field on the last day. My friend, who was a sophomore, had a motorcycle, and on that morning, one of the seniors wanted to ride it. My friend agreed but said he would be in the back. While riding through the parking lot, a car pulled out, and the bike hit it directly. The senior survived, but my friend went through the windows of the car and died instantly. Story 53. We experienced an asthma attack on the track, a reckless 4 a.m. drive at 100 miles per hour into a tree, a flipped-over three-wheeler, and a suicide attempt from which the individual survived but was not the same person upon returning. All were tragic and extremely unfortunate. There were more incidents, but these are the ones I remember. Story 54. When I was in 4th grade, the girl I walked to school with every morning was murdered by her father. He drugged both her and her brother, put them in the car in the garage, and then turned on the engine. He went too. Word on the street is that he never got over their mother passing away. Story 55. Everyone made fun of him and started rumors that he was using drugs, which was why he began going bald and showing up less frequently at school. A few months later, my teacher announced that he had passed away due to cancer. I will always think about you, Bryce. Story 56. Trying to swim with a pack full of rocks. He and his friends were trying to train like Special Forces soldiers. Story 57. My best friend from high school was murdered by the father of her unborn child, whom she was 6 months pregnant with. He beat her to death with a hammer in front of her 2-year-old daughter, who was the only survivor. We were 19. Story 58. It was 2 of my friends, but 3 kids in my case. They were 14 and told a 24-year-old man to stop sleeping with one of their sisters, who was 15. The 24-year-old came in the middle of the night and shot and killed 3 unarmed teenagers as they slept. Story 59. She was on a family vacation. She went up in a hot air balloon and had an asthma attack, but they couldn't get her down in time. Rest in peace, Peggy. Story 60. A tiny cut on the leg seemed insignificant. It became red and warm, but the school nurse did not take it seriously and sent him on his way. The next day, he developed sepsis and unfortunately died. It was shocking to everyone that a small cut could lead to such a severe outcome. Many of us were unaware of what a staph infection was before that incident. I am sure the people I grew up with now take minor wound care more seriously than the average person. Story 61. He was pushed in front of the train by one of the bullies while trying to escape. Story 62. She was hit by a car while walking home. It was terrible. I remember the day the school announced it. She was a wonderful person. Story 63. He went to the fair with his girlfriend. There was a shooter and he jumped in front of her, getting shot in the heart. Story 64. A car accident claimed the life of one of my best friends. He was passionate about cars, and I like to think he died doing something he loved. It was shocking to see it in the news and hear his name. Story 65. Jacking off with a belt around his neck. He was a very cool person as well. 2 others also died in motorcycle accidents. Story 66. It was not high school, but the last day of 8th grade. It was optional for us to attend school. About half of my small, rural community class attended, which was 10 out of 20 students. A girl from a farming family did not go to school that day. She was at home and decided to drive a half-mile down a gravel road to surprise her dad with lunch. She lost control, overcorrected, flipped the vehicle, and was pronounced dead at the scene. Our principal informed the few of us at school shortly before the end of the day. It was absolutely devastating for the community and especially for her family. Story 67. Shooting guns at water with his brother. A bullet ricocheted off a rock and struck his head. He was a sophomore at the time. I worked with his best friend, who was traumatized, and the most the school did for him was send a notice that he was going to be expelled for missing too much school. Story 68. She was crowned homecoming queen that Friday evening. While driving the 15 miles to school the next Monday morning, she collided her compact sedan with the back of a large tractor at 70 miles per hour while applying her makeup. Story 69. He hung himself in his closet because he was bullied for being a furry. His sister was the one who found him. 1 month before he took his life, I saw him at an anime convention in his fursuit. Many people thought it was cool. That was probably the only time he felt accepted for who he was. I appreciate all the support. I must admit, I used to be one of those edgy teenagers who thought being a furry was strange. I didn't bully the kid at my high school. I just let him do his own thing, but I definitely thought it was unusual. His death made me reevaluate my perspective on furries. Now I am very accepting, and my younger brother has come out as a furry. I am taking him to his first furry convention this summer, which will also be my first. Story 70. My Facebook had a friend suggestion about a year ago from a guy I went to high school with but never talked to. I was a loner and he was one of the popular guys. I looked him up to see how his life turned out. He was a recovering addict who had moved to Florida, where I also live now, and seemed to be doing well. He wasn't the hot jock. He was in high school. But he had a support group and was actively posting about his sobriety and rebuilding his life. Then, a month ago, an actual high school friend posted his obituary with a crowdfunding link attached. He overdosed. It's devastating, not because we were friends or anything, but because it seems to be the reason for many deaths I hear about these days. My own brother overdosed in a bathroom on Valentine's Day while his friends were all in the living room partying. Don't do drugs, folks. It's not as fun as it sounds, and it will ruin or end your life. Story 71. Throughout my 4 years in high school, we experienced approximately 1 suicide a year and many more attempts. The students have been quite difficult, and the counselors function more as secretaries with the ability to help students but often lack the genuine concern needed. Story 72. Choked on his gum, which got lodged in his throat while inhaling refrigerant from an air conditioning unit. Sadly, Story 73. It was right after September 11th. He and some other Middle Eastern friends went to Washington, D.C. as part of their youth group. He was targeted by a group of men who called him names and accused him of being in the city to set off an explosive device. Things became unclear because they were in a bar and the witnesses were all intoxicated. Words were exchanged by the other individuals, and he left the bar to escape from them. From what loved ones have pieced together, he was followed by the group, and they pushed him in front of an incoming train. He was killed. When the police asked what happened, they all claimed he killed himself, so it was ruled a suicide instead of the hate crime it was, and the police ignored the dozens of witnesses who saw the group threaten to kill him as revenge for September 11th. Everyone knows these individuals killed our friend, but the police refused to consider anything other than suicide despite evidence indicating he was murdered. Story 74. He committed suicide right before his 21st birthday. We lost touch around the end of sophomore year, but he was a good guy and very intelligent. Story 75. Crashed through a fence, flipped his truck into the pool, and drowned before the homeowners could break the glass to rescue him. Story 76. My son's graduating class of 2024 is from a small, rural town. About 2 years after graduation, 1/3 of the class had passed away, including a couple of suicides, a bizarre hiking accident, a routine surgery complication, a work accident, and a snowmobile accident. They started calling it the cursed class, which still upsets my son when someone mentions it. It was coincidental. If you take that age group and compare it nationally, there would be only 8 kids out of how many? It just so happened that these 8 were in a small community, so everyone was aware. My high school was large enough that I was in line with a kid I had never seen during the entire 4 years. Story 77. He took his own life because he was gay during a time when being openly gay in a rural town in the United States meant facing constant harassment. I am honestly shocked he didn't resort to violence at school given the severity of the bullying. 17 years later, I still think about him weekly. I came out as bisexual 8 years later and experienced relentless bullying in high school as well. I managed to get through it by hiding and skipping school. Story 78. She became pregnant and didn't want to tell her parents. She attempted to induce an abortion herself and ended up bleeding heavily. Story 79. He was walking home after a party, and we lived deep in the hills at that time. He stopped for a few minutes to rest when someone came out of their house and shot him point blank in the chest with a shotgun. He was 15. Story 80. Playing in a murky lake at night with a group, someone allegedly got their foot caught underwater in a stick formation and drowned. Rest in peace, friend. Story 81. Drowned in the family's swimming pool with an entire house full of people having a party. No alcohol was involved. Story 82. Driven to a field in Anoka and lured out of the car under the pretense of smoking a joint. Shot multiple times from behind over a mere $740. Story 83. He was evidently cleaning a gun when his sister picked it up. According to the police report, she accidentally shot him. Many years later, a mutual friend confided in me that it was not an accident and did not provide any specific motivation other than that she was tired of his behavior. When I have told this story in the past, I have been directed to talk to authorities. However, this was nearly 3 decades ago, and I cannot recall the full name of the person who told me or any of the people I remember being in their circle of friends. Any attempts I have made to look them up on social media have been largely unsuccessful. Story 84. Duchenne muscular dystrophy. At that time, it was an unusually long lifespan for someone with Duchenne. Story 85. A semi-truck collided with the freeway barrier, flew onto the local street, and landed on top of my friend who was in a car with his siblings. Story 86. For a bar mitzvah, a double-decker bus was rented to transport everyone to and from the party. The kids on the top deck opened a hatch on the roof and were leaning out to get their heads outside while on the highway. One child got clipped by an overpass. Story 87. He was having an affair with a married woman who was his teacher's assistant and substitute. When her husband found out, he confronted the young man and shot him, which made national news. Story 88. It was junior high for me. He put a garbage bag over his head and turned on the laughing gas. It was 1978. I think his dad was a dentist. It was a sad situation. Story 89. Not my school, but my sister's. A girl was there who had everything going for her. Ivy League schools pursuing her, top grades, acing state tests, a wealthy family, and she lived in a nice house in a beach neighborhood. She was stunning. Her parents were away to help her grandparents move into assisted living, and when they returned, the front door was open. They were instantly worried about her and their 3 cats. They went inside and found her in her bedroom, shot 7 times. She had no enemies, no debts, and no reason anyone would want her dead. A neighbor's camera captured the suspect, but he was wearing gloves, boots, and a ski mask that only had mesh over his eyes. The only evidence they had was that the gun was a Desert Eagle, since the bullets used were .50 AE. Fast forward a couple of years, and during some unrelated criminal investigations, they found their suspect. It turned out to be a gang initiation to kill a random child or teen, and they chose her. That individual is in prison now and will likely never see the light of day again. He is up for parole in 22 years, so if he behaves well, he could be released. It is also worth mentioning that the cats were never found either. Story 90. One person took their own life in the bathroom, another shot his pregnant girlfriend, who wanted an abortion, and later that day he also killed himself. One individual hung himself from a tree after being caught sexually assaulting a family member. All were from the same school and in the same grade. It was a very small town in upstate New York. Story 91. For seniors skipped school. They were going too fast while getting off the off-ramp and ran into a light pole. The passengers weren't wearing seatbelts and were thrown from the vehicle. School counselors were present the next day. 2 of my classmates knew her well. I did not. Story 92. One of the most popular kids, known for his good nature and wicked sense of humor, died in a motorcycle accident when he was just 17. He lost control of the motorcycle, slid off the road, and collided with a tree. Story 93. A car crash involved a deputy transporting a 2-year-old and her mother to the hospital. 4 children were on their way back from band practice. Unfortunately, there were no survivors. Story 94. Driving a Jeep too fast around a dangerous bend in wet conditions. One person was killed by a drunk driver who then went on to kill someone else a few years later while driving under the influence again. She was lovely. I didn't know the Jeep driver, but he was very popular, and his brother was also quite well liked. Story 95. just finished ninth grade in Texas in 1986. He went to New York to visit his grandmother for the summer. While mowing her lawn, a woman driving by went into labor, lost control of her car, and ran into the yard, hitting him. Rest in peace, Craig. Story 96. The story I heard was that he was skateboarding at a house party. He tried to grind on a concrete fountain in the backyard but fell and hit his head without wearing a helmet, resulting in his death almost instantly. I assumed there was drinking involved, although the official story did not mention anything about it, so I cannot confirm that for sure. Story 97. He was a nice kid to me. I never had any issues with him, and he never seemed unpleasant from what I knew. However, everyone was aware that he was a heavy drug user and had associated with the wrong crowd. He was out with his supposed friends for a joyride. Apparently, someone in the back seat, to whom he owed a lot of money for drugs, was unhappy with him and shot him in the back of the head. It seems they planned it. Story 98. One person died by suicide due to homophobic parents and a lack of outside support. Another person died in a car accident, which led to the installation of a much-needed stop sign at an intersection. The third person died in a motorcycle accident. Story 99. He ran back into his girlfriend's burning house to save the dogs after rescuing all the people. He was crushed by the collapsing roof, and they had to listen to him scream as he died. Story 100. At a summer party, he went out for a late-night swim with the others. He jumped in headfirst and hit some stones below. When he got inside, he was very tired and went for a rest on the couch. He never woke up again. It seemed unremarkable, but he fractured his neck during the jump. The school held a concert in his honor as a final farewell. Story 101. Several football players were spraying cooking spray into a plastic bag and inhaling it. The others became ill and one did not recover. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.